Welcome to the Agent of Wealth podcast with Marc Bautis from Bautis Financial. In this podcast, Marc helps guide you towards financial freedom, ensure you never run out of money, and create a balance in life that prioritizes what is most important to you. Join us for this journey as Marc draws from years of expertise and guest experts to solve the multiple wealth building challenges involved in your financial life.
Welcome back to the Agent of Wealth. This is your host, Marc Bautis. On today's show, we brought on a special guest, Viktor Jiracek. Viktor is a fix and flipper based out of Gainesville, Florida. He also mentors students across the U.S. and teaches them all aspects of how to get started in flipping real estate. Viktor, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to talk about today's topic. A lot of people I see come across, they're interested in building wealth through real estate, but they're not sure on how to get started or what path in real estate to pursue. So I know fix and flipping is one way of getting into it. Maybe if you can start off with just defining what a fix and flip is and how you got into it.
Yeah, for sure. So just to be clear, so fix and flip, so you buy a property, you own it, you fix it up, and you sell it. So that's been pretty popular recently, and I really enjoyed it and got into it. I've tried all different types of real estate. I've tried like wholesaling and this fix and flip and rentals and like all these different things I've tried, but I really like the fix and flip. It's really like you're in, you're out, you get a big check and you can move on versus with rentals, like it's kind of long-term hassle, long-term, things you're dealing with. So really like the fix and flip. How I got into it, I just always had the bug for real estate, always had this urge in the back of my mind over the years, like, hey, real estate's interesting. I want to get into it. I want to try it out. And my thinking was always like, okay, let me do X and then I'll do Y, which is real estate. So let me do this first thing and be successful there. And then I'll do real estate. And then I eventually realized, like, why don't I just do real estate, which is what I really want to do. And it was always like, I need money to get started. And I later found out like that wasn't really needed, at least my money, right? So you need other people's money. We can talk about that. But that's pretty much how I got started. Then I slowly eased into it. I went part-time with the real estate, just doing on the side while working full-time, and then made the leap eventually to full-time.
Yeah, it's probably the path that a lot of people take, or at least they want to take with it. I guess the first thing is finding a property to buy. Is that the first step in the process?
Exactly. Yeah, that's the biggest thing. And a lot of people kind of put it backwards, the cart before the horse, so to speak, where they're like, okay, I want to get started in real estate. Okay, let me get my money lined up. Let me get contractors lined up. And all that doesn't really help you unless you have a deal, unless you have a specific house or property you can work on. Like you can have the best contractors in the world, but if you don't have a deal, it's not going to help you out. So typically first, the best thing is the deal, and you make money when you buy. It took me a while to figure that out, but honestly, that's the case. You can make every mistake in the book. It can take you longer than you want. You can go over budget. You can sell it for less than you want, all that stuff. And if you bought it right, then you're still profitable. And I've seen that time and time again.
So how do people find deals? Are they hiring a realtor? Are they, are they going through the MLS themselves? Are they just driving around looking for properties?
I think the biggest thing is to make a distinction here. So it's kind of like two types of properties. Let's say there's on market and off market. On market is what most people are familiar with. That's Zillow, that's Realtor.com, that's MLS, that's going through a realtor where everyone can see it. It's all public data with regards to it. So it's on market, everyone can see it. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but it's very competitive to say the least because everyone can see it. So everyone's bidding on it. If it's a good deal, it's going to go in a day or so. And like you're competing with everyone, which is a tough place to be in. I recommend, this is how I get about 99% of my deals, is what's called off market. And that's where you're going directly to the seller, directly to the homeowner and, marketing and selling to them or trying to buy their property. That's where I've seen the most success. So for this year, I'm on track for about 30 flips, which is great. I'm excited about that. Only one was on market, if that gives you any sort of context, like where the deals are coming from. Like only one came from MLS, and that was kind of a lucky one, to be honest. So that's where you source deals. We can get into details on that, but I just want to make that high level distinction because a lot of beginners like, okay, cool, I want to get into real estate. Let me get a realtor. Let me start looking on Zillow. And it's like, that's going to be a hard place to find a good deal. And if you find a deal, it's going to be very slim margins where you're making not enough to justify the risk.
And then when you say that you're marketing to the seller or to the owner, how do you find that owner? Are you just kind of randomly reaching out to owners and hoping that they're interested in selling? You
can open a phone book and call everyone. And I think eventually you'll get something, but there's a cleaner way to go about it. So if I were to go to you, Marc, and I say like, hey, I want to buy your house, and let's say your house is worth 100,000, and let's say I'm going to offer you 50,000 for it. Like, what would you say? What would be your response?
I'd say no.
Okay, exactly. Yeah. So the question is like, who would take that offer, or who would be willing to continue that conversation? And the answer is there has to be some sort of motivation there. Like if I ask a random person on the street that question, I'm just going to get a no over and over again. But if there's some sort of motivation, that can be a lot of things. Like if the place needs a lot of work in terms of excessive repairs, if they're going through a divorce, if it's like late on their taxes, if there's a code violation, if they are an out-of-state owner, like there's all these layers of motivation that people can have with regards to the property and just wanting to get rid of it. So let's say you were going through some of those things in your life, like it would be a different conversation. Like, I know the place needs a lot of work and blank and blank and blank. So maybe 50,000 is too low, but could you do 60,000? So you can kind of go back and forth with all that stuff. But that's how I see it, where there has to be some sort of layer of motivation. There's ways to look up that motivation. You can get like lists, or you can, target people based on that. But that's a great way to start, because that's a good observation. If you're just going to call people randomly, you're not going to get too far.
So I guess some of that info you are able to obtain, whether someone's late on taxes or I guess the driving around, you can find houses that look in disarray or that need repairs.
That too. So that's called driving for dollars. Driving for dollars is what it's called specifically. So yeah, basically like you drive around neighborhoods and you're looking for houses, that like kind of stand out where they're in disrepair compared to the rest of the neighborhood. Like if all the neighborhood is crummy and beat up, you're looking for like the worst house. Like if it's in a nice neighborhood, you're looking for the house that's beat up. And once you have the address, you can look at the property owner. Once you have the property owner and the address, you can look at like contact information, like phone numbers, emails, that sort of thing, and start reaching out. So the driving for dollars works. I've gotten deals that way, and works. You have to put in the effort for sure. It is a numbers game, is what I've seen as well. So it's not like call one person, get one deal. Like you gotta. I recommend at least 100. Start with at least like a list of 100 properties, and then go from there. You won't be able to get a hold of everyone. Not everyone will want to sell, and then not everyone will want to sell at the price you want. So just through the numbers of it and just law of averages, then you'll get a deal.
Earlier, you mentioned about houses that are listed and the margins probably don't work on those because you're competing with everyone. So let's say you do find that off-market property that you want to offer on. Mm-hmm. How do you determine what price makes sense, or what price can work with what you're trying to do in terms of making a profit on this? And then how do you determine what work is involved, or what that fixed part of it that work is involved to get it to the price that you think you can make money on this?
Yeah. So when it comes to, that's a good question. So when it comes to real estate and like a specific house, there's a million variables. What's the school district like? Is it, on a main road or on a dirt road? How many bedrooms, bathrooms? Like there's so many variables when it comes to all of this. Really, you want to look at two numbers, and that's like the estimated repairs. So like what do you need to put into it to get it to that level that you need to be able to sell it? That's the first thing. Second thing is what's called ARV. That's like after repaired value. It's like, what can you sell it for once it's all fixed up? When it has a new roof and when it has a new flooring and new kitchen, like what can you sell it for? So that's what I look at. It's basically just two numbers, just to cut through all the complicated and all the variables and just really get to the heart of if it's a good deal or not. On top of that, I typically do what's called like 70% rule. So it's 70% ARV minus repairs. So let's say ARV, like the retail price is 100,000, 10,000 repairs. So 100,000 times 0.7 minus 10 is going to put you at 60. So anything below 60 is a great deal. Anything above 60, not so much. So then you can, really know within, 30 seconds or less, like if a deal is a deal. Because there are so many like numbers to run, different variables and factors. Like you want to be able to make decisions on the spot, especially like if you hesitate in real estate with where the market's at and how hot it is. Like even if you wait a day on a good deal, like it might be gone. So you really have to have these quick rules of thumbs and metrics. And they're not perfect, don't get me wrong, but at least you have something to work through, like some sort of mental model you can think through quickly to make sure it's good.
How does someone come up with the estimated repairs, the cost of those, if maybe they're just starting out or they don't have experience in repairing things? Mm-hmm. Is there a way to do it? Do they partner with someone, or what's the best way to really come up with and obviously it's going to be an estimate, but as accurate as an estimate as possible? I
mean, just experience is best. You can start to ask around and talk to contractors. I think that experience is the best. Just talk to people and understand their numbers, understand where they're coming from. Typically, when it comes to repairs, it's two things. It's material and labor. So you can know your material costs. You can look that up. Home Depot and Lowe's has a lot of stuff. So if you know, hey, I want a specific type of carpet. Okay, how much does carpet material cost? Like you can look that up pretty easily. And then labor is a little trickier. But you can just start that way. And that's how I started. You just kind of make your best bet. You just hope for the best. And then you get better and better over time. You get more and more refined over time. I'd say the other thing is when it comes to this, a lot of beginners make the mistake, like you can put a house under contract and you can back out for whatever reason, if it doesn't pass inspection or, there's this, that, or the other problem with the place, you can always back out of a property. So your benefit of getting into it is really high and your cost is really low because you can always back out with minimal cost is how I look at it. So keep that in mind. So you can always put it under contract, get some more time, get some contractors in there, get some quotes. And then if you're way off on your numbers, you can always back out and there's no harm, no foul. So just to help your kind of listeners think through that.
When you started out or even now, are you doing some, all of the repairs?
Yeah. So when I started, it was me, as much as I could do, I couldn't, do any roofing or anything like that. As much as I could do. So I would help with the painting and the flooring and the demo, the easy stuff. I never did electrical. And then over time, I realized one, I'm not very good at these things. So I'm, at least at painting, I'm average at best. And then if I'm painting and doing that sort of thing, I can't be working on higher level or higher value activities like finding deals, finding money, that sort of thing. So I found out hey, if I'm working 8 hours a day, that's 8 hours a day where I'm not getting deals. So let me focus on, getting deals or trying to other stuff to get started. So that's kind of how I started. Just transitioned over time to slowly hiring people and hiring subcontractors and growing from there.
Okay. You mentioned finding money. So let's talk a little bit about after you find the property, you estimate the repairs, you look at the ARV and it looks like this is going to work out. How do you fund these projects, assuming maybe you don't have a pile of money sitting there, and what other sources of money are out there?
And this is the hurdle, and this is what I did on my first deal. It's kind of called a money partner is what I'd say. So basically what happened, I found this great deal here in Gainesville, and I was like, okay, well, I don't have the funds. I had maybe a couple thousand to my name at the time. It's I don't have the funds to really do this deal on my own. So what am I going to do? So basically what I did, I found what's called a money partner. So they put in the funds to buy it, to fix it up, to sell it. And then we would split the profit once it sells. And that way I was nothing into it. And I did the legwork. I did the sweat equity work of, finding the deal, helping run the renovations, helping to sell the place. So I was the one there making it happen, putting their money to work. And they were just like a money partner, just, putting their money to work. And the pitch there is do they want to have their money sit in the bank and make, 0.01%, or do they want to put it to work? And on that deal, I think we made about $28K net profit and we split that. And that was, I think, in and out 4 months, something like that. So, do you want to make 0.01%? In that case, she would have made, I don't know, $100 interest, or does she want to make whatever, 10 grand, 15 grand? So it's very compelling. So that's how I'd recommend it. So again, the biggest thing is why we talked about getting the deal first, because the biggest thing is the deal. If you get a great deal, people are going to throw money at you to get it, get it done. If there's a big spread and there's a big profit potential, then it's a great neighborhood, and there's a lot of potential to really turn it into a success, and everyone can win.
And you mentioned the money partner. Are you buying these houses for cash, or are you taking conventional loans and the money partner's helping with maybe some of the equity that the bank is looking for, or are these all financed solely by outside funds?
Yeah. So there's, when it comes to these properties, there's the conventional finance that everyone knows. I'd say 97% of deals are just conventional. The 3% are kind of we may call off-brand or non-conventional, let's call it that. So conventional, typically when you do a conventional loan, you have to get an appraisal, everything has to work, if that makes sense. You can't have a hole in the roof, the HVAC system can't be shot. It has to be working because it has to get insurance, and then it's lendable, essentially. So as you can imagine, with a lot of these properties, it might not be in the best shape. So you can't really go the conventional route because it might have a hole in the roof. It might have plumbing and burst and all the pipes are broken. So it might have these issues. So you can't go traditional lending. So what are you left with? So you can go cash. That's one route. I've done a lot of that. There's another route called hard money. And that's basically the same as cash. So you pay, that's kind of non-conventional. And that's allowing for these sort of issues and these sort of, you're buying the property with these problems. That's typically it's more expensive. So it's 8 to 12%, interest. And there's a lot of other things that go with that, but it's typically higher interest, higher cost, but it does bake into that risk factor. Hey, it needs more repairs. Hey, it needs more work. So you do need to go typically like the non-traditional route for these types of deals.
Okay, so let's say you got the deal, you got the financing, now the project gets started. Are you essentially a project manager on this, where you're kind of coordinating whether you have an electrician coming and whether maybe you're doing some of it yourself? And how do you make sure that this thing gets to the end, to the end zone with what you're trying to do with it?
Yeah, so typically when you're starting, I would recommend to be as hands-on as possible, because you have to learn all these things. You have to learn how to manage people and what's a typical timeline. You have to learn all these things, and then you could eventually hire that out. So where I'm at now, like I currently have a project manager, and she takes care of everything. So she makes sure like the painters show up on time. Okay, pay them. Make sure the electrician shows up on time. Okay, pay them. But as you're starting, I would recommend to be that project manager, just so you know what's real and what's not. This is also like a larger management philosophy. Like you need to know the job before you hire it out. Because then if you don't know the job, like you won't know if they're doing a good job. Like you don't know if they're bullshitting you or if they're telling the truth, or if like the delays you're encountering are legitimate delays, or if it's because they're not good at their job. So you just need to know like what you can and can't get away with. So that's what I recommend there. That's just a larger management philosophy. And it's, if you know what you're doing, then it is really fun. It's really cool to see the transformation of a property. Like before, it's crummy, it's beat up, it's outdated, and after, it's nice, it's modern, sleek. Everyone wants to live there. So to go through that transformation is really cool. So I do recommend, like when folks are starting, like yes, do the project management.
At what point did you realize, okay, this is going to work, and aside from now, I can go from this just being a side gig to transitioning to doing this full time?
Yeah, so I was working full time. I was like an administrator for a home health agency, kind of like an office manager, administrator, kind of corporate, if you want to put it that way. I was also doing Uber on the weekend. I knew like real estate is something I want to do, so I slowly started to get traction. Like got my first deal. There's something here. This isn't all, smoke and mirrors. Like there's something here. And then I got like the second deal and the third deal. And that's why I recommend your listeners, like once you get some sort of momentum, some sort of traction where it's almost a repeatable, like, hey, I'm consistently doing a deal a month, or I'm doing that consistency. Like once you have consistency, like, hey, if I do X action, I'm going to get Y results. Then it's a great time to transition. So that's how I did it. So I was working full-time, Uber, real estate, started to get some traction. First thing to go was the 9 to 5, just because the Uber was flexible. I could do that on the weekends. Like that wouldn't affect me too much. Like, okay. So then was doing the real estate and the Uber, started to get more and more traction. I was, doing more deals consistently. And I was like, okay, well, it doesn't make sense to do the Uber anymore. Let me just focus on full-time real estate. So then I made the transition. So it was an easing process. It took like 6 to 9 months probably to make the full transition. So it wasn't, and this is what I recommend folks don't do. Like don't quit everything and jump into a full force. Like this slow process of like learning and growing and just building your foundations. It just takes time. Like this real estate or any side hustle or anything or business just takes time. Like don't quit everything and jump into it, because it just you got to build some traction first.
I know you mentioned the number of houses that you flipped last year, this year. What are you looking to do, or what are your goals for 2022? And does it get to any point where it starts getting hard to scale?
I think the biggest thing is, you build more team. Like as you want to do more, like you build more teams. So right now it's a pretty lean team. It's me, an assistant, and like a project manager. So probably my next step, if anything, would be to hire some like acquisitions person, someone out there, finding the deals and like taking care of that for me. So last year I did 20 flips, this year 30. Bought 27 so far this year. So I'm on track and have a couple under contract. Realistically, what I want to do for next year is more of my own deals. So this year I did maybe like 5 to 10 of my own deals. The rest were partner deals. And with a partner deal, like you're splitting the profit, like kind of that money partner, because I went from 2 flips to 8 flips to 20 to 30. So I've grown really fast, and I've just been at this 3 years. So because I've grown that fast, like I didn't have $1 million sitting around, so I couldn't just do my own deal. So I was grabbing partners. So I just really want to level off and start to do my own deals and just really, focus on that. Because let's say I'm going to make $30K net profit on a flip, if that's 50-50 to a partner, like I'm missing out on half on that. And I like my partners, don't get me wrong, but I'm just in a place where I can just do it on my own. So that's probably the next step. I used to be of the mindset, like grow as fast as you can. I'm starting to see like you start to trade off things as you get bigger. Because, I was talking to someone else about this. He's a flipper out of Texas, and he's saying like that sweet spot is 20 to 30. Like after that, you start to have lower margins and less profit because you have to hire people, and you have people on your payroll, and you have more people whose mouths you have to feed. So you start to get into a different game. So
Right.
I want to get to a place where I'm doing my own deals. That 20-30 is super doable. It might sound like a lot, but if we're in and out, we typically have like 10, 12 at a time in different stages. So that's how I'm looking at it. So I'm, happy taking. And another thing here, it's a long-term game. I used to be of the opinion, if you look at the numbers, like especially with real estate investing, like this is an exponential game, and you have to allow time to compound it and your money to compound. So I'll ask you this: like, would you rather like double your company every year for the next decade? So that's option one. Would you rather grow 20% a year for 50 years? That's option two.
Option two.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, if you look at it, the numbers, like it's magnitudes, it's several times bigger. So I'm starting to have that mindset. Like before, it's like double, double, double. But it's like, I want to do this long term, and I want to do this, I need to allow for time to happen and compounding to happen.
How long do each of these projects usually take from start to finish?
Well, the closing table is 4 months. So we buy it. Typically to renovate it takes 30 days to 45 days. So we're trying to get it in and out as quick as possible. So 30 to 45 days. We list it. Luckily, it's a really hot market. So typically within a week, we got it under contract, right? And then to close, it takes 30 days to 60 days. So that's typically the timeline. So 4 months in and out. So we're really active during that like first 30 days to 45 days. Like once it's fully renovated, like there's not much to do. There's some paperwork to do and it's not bad, but that first time is the most active. So that's when, that's why I say like when you're doing 30 flips at a time, it might seem like a lot, or not 30 flips in a year. It might seem like a lot, but it really isn't. Where it's kind of like juggling. If you're familiar with juggling, like whenever you're juggling, you don't necessarily have all the balls in your hand. You only have like 1 or 2 in your hand. So that's kind of how it feels with flipping. Like at any given time, maybe we have 3, 4, 5 that we're renovating, which isn't too bad, and they're in different stages. So that's how I see that.
And is the typical buyer that's buying it from you, are they going to live in it? Are they an investor who's looking maybe to rent it for cash flow, or is it mixed?
9 times out of 10, it's like a retail buyer, like an end buyer with a family who wants to live there. And we're seeing like, this is the same with flipping. This is a good tip for your listeners here. Like people want like turnkey move-in ready properties. I've tested out, I've played around with like getting it almost there, and maybe it needs a little couple repairs, but I give it for less price. But people want like move-in ready. Like they don't want to paint walls. They don't want to, install baseboards. They just want to move in, get back to life. So that's what I've seen as well. Just focusing on those things. So just really making sure like they don't have to do anything. They don't have to do anything. They just move in with no worries.
Are you strictly doing your projects out of out of Florida, and really why I'm asking is, are there better geographical locations for this?
Yeah, no. So I'd say like local is best. And that's what I do. I do like Alachua County, which is like 30-minute drive surrounding me. So I'd say local is best. If for whatever reason, like your local market is like saturated or non-accessible, which can mean a lot of things. Like if you're in a California or like a New York or like one of these higher, or like maybe like in Miami, where for your first flip, you have to do like $500,000 or some crazy number like that. I would recommend like, get started in a smaller market. If you can do virtual, I've done virtual. I've done a flip in like Indiana. I've done deals in like Indiana. So if you have to do virtual. Just to get started, because I don't want you to throw $500,000 on your first flip. Like I'd rather you do 2 or 3 smaller ones or 2 to 5 smaller ones.
I guess it's a learning experience as you're getting started with it, and make it as less costly as possible with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially like on a $500,000 house, if you're wrong by 10%, because margin of errors is really important when flipping and investing. If you're wrong by 10%, that's $50,000. But if you're wrong on a $100,000 house, that's $10,000. So it's a lot less loss. And that's the other thing I see with flipping and investing. Like it is a skill, so you get better over time. So your wins are going to be bigger. Your losses are going to be smaller, if not, non-existent. You're going to get quicker. Like it is a skill. So realize like your first flip or your first deal is going to be your worst. And then you just gets better from there. So that's the good news.
Looking back at when you got started and up until now, what are some of the either mistakes or things that went wrong that maybe you would have done something differently if you had to do it again?
I was recommended by a mentor like 5-6 years ago, like, hey, you should get into real estate, you should get into flipping. I didn't listen, which was a mistake. And I eventually got started, but that was 3 years ago. So if you follow that same, and that's the other thing, when it comes to your growth, if you do it right, like it's not linear. So if I started, 5-6 years ago, like where would I have been today? And that, totally different world, totally different place. I could have been at 50, maybe 60, or just in a different place. So that just realizing, like we talked about, that compounding, that exponential growth. I wish I would have gotten started earlier, honestly.
real estate, just like every other market, is cyclical.
Yes.
And obviously no one knows when that cycles take place, but how do you account for if there is a pullback in the market, or how do you account for some of these projects? And I guess, that's kind of something happens, you adjust, but what is the plan for if there is a pullback?
So what's really cool about like real estate and flipping, like you have something that's very opposite to flipping. So flipping works great when it's like a seller's market. For rentals, which is the opposite, it's great when it's a buyer's market, because then you can pick any deal. And that's what it was like 2008 to 2012. Like you can have your pick of the litter, so to speak. Like you can pick any deal and it would cash flow. Now, if you pick any deal, it won't cash flow. Like I'll bet you money that typically it doesn't cash flow. So you got to really be, clever about how to find your deal. So as things start to pull back, we'll start to load up more on rentals and start to do more rental deals. So that's the plan. Like right now, I've done maybe a handful, like 2-3 rentals this year. But I'll just start to switch it out. And just like you mentioned, like it's an adjustment. Like there's a strategy. How I see it in investing in real estate, like there's always a winning strategy. You just got to know what that is and act on it. So just make sure to follow the winning strategy. Like at any given time, like there's people winning. So in the car business, there's like the retail car sales, and there was what's called like buy here, pay here, which is like self-finance vehicles. And when the market's great, like the retail and the new car dealerships are doing great. And when the market's not so good, you have these buy here, pay here dealerships who are like, offer financing, work with worse credit and that sort of thing. And they start to win. So it's the same thing for real estate. Like if the market's up, there's a specific strategy that wins. If the market's down, there's a specific strategy that wins. If we hit like an apocalypse situation, that no longer matters. So you don't have to worry.
And when you say shift to rentals, you mean basically purchasing properties, taking the net cash flow from them as income. And then, if the market does shift back again, you'd go back and maybe sell them and go repeat the flipping process.
That's it. Yep, that's it.
What advice or tips for someone just getting started? What's that's like you mentioned it earlier, the hardest thing is that first deal, or the first thing to get started. How do they do it?
Yeah, I think the way that a lot of people think about getting into real estate is wrong. Especially like you hear a lot of motivational speakers today, like you got to take massive action. You got to, do crazy things and, just drop everything and jump into it. I really disagree with that. I've seen, especially for me, and I've seen for like the students I teach as well, like the best way to get into this is like baby steps. So you can slowly change your habits and slowly get into it. So like the first time one way I get deals is cold calling. So the first time I ever did cold calling, I think I cold called for like 2 minutes. I cold called for like 2 minutes. I think I had one phone call. I don't know if anyone answered, but I had one phone call. And the second time I cold called for 5 minutes. And the third time it was 10 minutes. And then it was 15. And then I just eased into it. That's what I recommend for your listeners too. Like that's how you implement habits. That's how you make change, instead of the opposite. Like, hey, I'm going to cold call 8 hours today. And then he never do it. And then he push it off and he push it off. And then it becomes this big thing. So like really baby steps. So the biggest baby step is, so we know like the biggest thing is getting a deal. How do you get a deal? Well, you need to talk to a seller. You got to talk to someone. You got to talk to the homeowner who wants to sell. So that's the next homework. Like that's the first baby step. Like don't make an offer. Don't anything. Just talk to him. Like, how long have you owned it? Why are you selling? What's the condition of the place? What do you think it needs in terms of repairs? Just these little questions just to get you comfortable. And the next baby step is to make an offer. The next baby step is, so on and so forth. So that's how I see change. And that's how I think people actually act. It sounds good on paper, like, make 100 offers in a weekend and you'll get a deal. But I've seen that just never work. So take these baby steps to make these changes, really get comfortable with it. You've got your comfort zone. If you expand it little by little, you'll start to really grow it. And you got to, slowly change, who you are and what you do, and you'll eventually see success.
Makes sense. Well, we're just about out of time. Victor, I'd like to thank you for being on the show. You provided some great info and insight into the world of fix and flipping. How best can someone find out more information about what you do? And I know you do teach students this. So how best can someone reach out to you?
Yeah, no, for sure. So I flip on my own full time. I also mentor people full time. The best place to reach me is on Facebook. So if you look up my name, you'll find me. I also have a free Facebook group if folks want to join, Six-Figure House Flipper. I have like great tips. I know we talked about the repairs. So I actually have a repair estimate guide that breaks down everything, like how much does roof cost, how much does flooring cost. So folks can join there, and I can send over that repair estimate guide. But that's the best place. I'm really active on Facebook. So if folks want to reach out, even if you're not interested in the mentorship, totally fine. You just want to reach out and say hi. I'm here to help.
Great. We'll link to all that in the show notes. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in today.
Thank you for listening to the Agent of Wealth podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered represents the views and opinions of the guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Bautis Financial. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional financial planning and investment advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investments and financial planning.